The October rain drummed against the windows of Pemberton and Associates on Beacon Hill, each drop seeming to echo the tension that had been building in the Hartwell family for over a decade. Rebecca Hartwell sat in her rental car across from the imposing brownstone law office, watching her siblings arrive for their father's will reading. At 35, Rebecca had spent the last 12 years building a successful consulting firm in Seattle, 3,000 miles away from the family that had written her off as selfish and uncaring. Her designer coat and confident demeanor masked the knot of anxiety in her stomach as she watched her older brother Marcus emerge from a black sedan, followed by her sister Caroline's Mercedes. Through the rain-streaked windshield, she could see them talking animatedly, no doubt discussing how their selfish sister had finally bothered to show up. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant in Seattle. The Morrison deal closed. You're officially worth $50 million. Congratulations, boss. She stared at the message, then at the imposing law office where her father's final words would soon be revealed. $50 million, and yet sitting here in Boston's prestigious Back Bay. She felt like the same unwanted daughter who'd been told she was too ambitious for her own good and didn't understand what family meant. The irony wasn't lost on her. While her siblings had remained in Boston, working at the family's struggling textile company that had been hemorrhaging money for years, she'd built an empire, helping failing businesses turn profitable. Yet somehow, she was the one who didn't care about family. Rebecca finally stepped out of the rental car, her heels clicking against the wet cobblestones of Mount Vernon Street. The autumn wind carried the scent of fallen leaves and old money, a combination that always reminded her why she'd left Boston in the first place. Inside the law office, the atmosphere was thick with barely concealed hostility. Marcus, 42, and bearing their father's stern jawline, barely acknowledged her presence. Caroline, 39 and perfectly coiffed, despite the rain, offered a cold nod that spoke volumes about their relationship. Rebecca, Marcus said, finally, his voice carrying the same disapproval their father had always shown. Surprised you could take time away from your precious business to be here. Surprised you're still angry about something that happened 12 years ago. Rebecca replied evenly, taking a seat across from them at the polished mahogany table. The room felt like a mausoleum, dark wood paneling, portraits of long-dead judges, and the musty smell of old leather-bound law books. Attorney James Pemberton, a distinguished man in his 70s who'd been the family lawyer for 3 decades, entered with a thick manila folder. Thank you all for coming, Pemberton said, settling into his chair. I know this has been a difficult time since William's passing 6 months ago. Rebecca felt a pang of guilt. She'd been in Tokyo closing a major deal when her father died of a sudden heart attack. By the time she'd gotten the news and flown back to Boston, the funeral was over. Her absence had only reinforced the family narrative that she was too busy for family obligations. Before we begin, Pemberton continued, I should mention that William left specific instructions about how this reading should be conducted. Some of you may be surprised by certain provisions. Caroline shifted in her chair, her diamond wedding ring catching the light from the brass desk lamp. Daddy always said blood was thicker than water. I'm sure he remembered who stayed loyal to the family business. Marcus nodded in agreement. Rebecca made her choice years ago when she walked away from everything Daddy built. She chose money over family. Rebecca remained silent, remembering the fight that had driven her away. She'd proposed modernizing their textile operations, moving into technical fabrics and sustainable manufacturing. Her father had called her ideas newfangled nonsense and accused her of trying to destroy family tradition. The irony was that her suggestions might have saved the company from its current financial troubles. Actually, Pemberton said, opening the folder with deliberate care, Williams will contain some very specific language about family loyalty and business acumen. Shall we proceed? The room fell silent except for the tick of an antique grandfather clock in the corner. Rebecca found herself holding her breath, preparing for the final rejection she'd been expecting since the day she'd left Boston with nothing but a business degree and a burning desire to prove herself. I, William Theodore Hartwell, being of sound mind and body, ... Pemberton began, his voice carrying across the room like a pronouncement of judgment. Attorney Pemberton's voice filled the room as he continued reading. William Hartwell's last will and testament. Rebecca studied her siblings' faces, noting the confident expectation in Marcus's expression and Caroline's barely contained satisfaction. To my son Marcus, who has devoted his career to maintaining our family business traditions. I leave my collection of antique watches and my membership in the Somerset Club, knowing he will appreciate their historical significance." Marcus smiled and nodded, clearly pleased with what he saw as recognition of his loyalty to my daughter Caroline, who has been a devoted wife and mother while supporting our family's philanthropic endeavors. I leave my wife's jewelry collection and our summer home on Nantucket, trusting she will use both to continue our family's social contributions." Caroline's smile was radiant as she glanced triumphantly at Rebecca. The summer house alone was worth several $1,000,000. Rebecca felt the familiar sting of being the outsider. But she kept her expression neutral. She'd learned years ago not to show vulnerability to her family. Pemberton paused, looking directly at Rebecca before continuing. "However, the bulk of my estate, including Hartwell Industries, all manufacturing facilities, the family home on Commonwealth Avenue, and my investment portfolio requires more detailed explanation." The atmosphere in the room shifted. Marcus straightened in his chair, while Caroline's confident smile faltered slightly. "William left a sealed letter to be read at this point in the proceedings," Pemberton explained, producing an envelope with Rebecca's name written in her father's distinctive handwriting. Rebecca's heart pounded as the attorney opened the letter. Whatever her father had written, it would be his final words to her and possibly his final judgment. "My dear Rebecca," Pemberton read aloud, "if you are hearing this, it means you set aside your busy schedule and successful life to honor your old father's memory. Your brother and sister have always believed that leaving Boston meant you didn't care about family. They were wrong." Marcus and Caroline exchanged confused glances. Their earlier confidence evaporating, Pemberton continued. "For 12 years, I've been receiving anonymous donations that kept Hartwell Industries afloat. Monthly payments of $50,000 to $100,000 that covered payroll when orders were down, equipment repairs when machinery broke, and emergency funds when we faced bankruptcy. The donations always came with one condition: that no one in the family could ever know who was sending the money." Rebecca felt tears threatening as her father's words continued. "I hired private investigators 3 years ago and discovered what I suspected. My daughter Rebecca, the one we accused of abandoning family, has been secretly supporting us from 3,000 miles away. She saved our family business, our employees' jobs, and our legacy while never asking for credit or recognition." The silence in the room was deafening. Caroline's face had gone pale, while Marcus stared at Rebecca with dawning realization and something that might have been shame. "The investigators found more," Pemberton read. "Rebecca has been paying for her nephew's private school tuition, her niece's medical expenses, and has even covered the property taxes on our family home twice when the business couldn't manage it. She did all of this while building her own empire, never letting pride get in the way of protecting her family." Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she remembered all those wire transfers, all the sleepless nights worrying about the family business while managing her own company's growth. She'd told herself she was just protecting her father's legacy. But the truth was simpler. Despite everything, she'd never stopped loving them. Therefore, the letter continued. "I leave the majority of my estate to the daughter who understood that caring for family isn't about proximity or words, it's about actions. Rebecca has proven herself not just as a businesswoman, but as the truest guardian of our family's future." The grandfather clock's ticking seemed impossibly loud in the stunned silence that followed. Caroline was openly crying now, while Marcus stared down at his hands, his earlier arrogance completely deflated. "Mrs. Patterson in accounting told me something interesting yesterday," Caroline said, referring to their longest-tenured employee. "She said Dad used to sit in his office sometimes, looking at old photos of the 3 of us when we were kids. She thinks he regretted how things ended between us." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. He kept articles about Rebecca's business successes in his desk drawer. Every magazine interview, every award ceremony photo. He was proud of her, even if he couldn't bring himself to say it. Rebecca felt tears threatening again, a common occurrence since returning to Boston. "I found something in his personal effects that Pemberton gave me." She pulled out a faded business proposal, her original modernization plan from 12 years ago, covered with her father's handwritten notes. "Look at this," she said, showing them pages where their father had scribbled comments like "brilliant idea" and "why didn't I listen?" next to her suggestions. He'd been studying my proposals for years, probably realizing they were right but too proud to admit it. The siblings stood together, looking at their father's private acknowledgement of Rebecca's vision. Around them, the factory hummed with purposeful energy, modern equipment operated by skilled workers. producing innovative products for 21st century markets. I have an idea, Marcus said suddenly. What if we established a scholarship program in Dad's name? For young entrepreneurs and innovators who want to modernize traditional industries. Caroline's eyes lit up. We could partner with MIT and Harvard Business School, give opportunities to people who might face the same resistance to new ideas that Rebecca did. Rebecca smiled at her siblings' enthusiasm. The William Hartwell Innovation Scholarship. I love it. We could fund it through the company's profits, make innovation part of our legacy. A commotion near the factory entrance caught their attention. A group of visitors was being led through by Janet Morrison. Their new operations manager, a woman Rebecca had recruited from one of her Seattle clients. That's the delegation from the Japanese textile conglomerate, Caroline explained. They're interested in licensing our antimicrobial fabric technology for their Asian markets. The Germans are coming next week, Marcus added. Apparently, word is spreading in the industry about what we're doing here. Who knew Boston could become a hub for technical textile innovation? Rebecca watched the Japanese executives examining their equipment with obvious interest. Remembering all the nights she'd spent in Seattle wondering if her family's business would survive, now, Hartwell Industries was becoming a destination for industry leaders from around the world. There's something I need to tell you both, Rebecca said, turning to face her siblings directly. I've been thinking about relocating my consulting firm's headquarters to Boston. Not because the business needs it, but because I want to be here. I want to be part of what we're building together. Marcus and Caroline exchanged glances before Caroline stepped forward and hugged Rebecca tightly. We'd love nothing more than to have you home. It won't be easy, Marcus added, joining the embrace. We've got 12 years of bad habits and misunderstandings to work through. But I think Dad would be proud of what we're accomplishing. As they stood together on the factory floor, surrounded by the sound of productive machinery and purposeful work, Rebecca realized something profound had shifted. She'd spent 12 years proving she could succeed alone. But success felt infinitely better when shared with the people who mattered most. Her phone buzzed with a text from her Seattle assistant. The Hartwell Industries story is getting national attention. Forbes wants an interview about the Boston textile renaissance. You're changing how people think about family businesses. Rebecca showed the message to her siblings, who grinned with pride. They were no longer just preserving their father's legacy, they were transforming it into something he could never have imagined but would have wholeheartedly supported. Ready for the afternoon shift meeting? Marcus asked. We're announcing the new profit-sharing program for all employees. Ready? Rebecca replied, feeling more at home than she had in years. Let's show them what the Hartwell family can accomplish when we work together. 1 year later, the Hartwell family gathered in the renovated conference room of their expanded headquarters. The old factory had been transformed into a modern manufacturing facility, while a new glass and steel office building housed their design teams and administrative staff. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they could see Boston Harbor and the city skyline their father had loved. Rebecca sat at the head of the polished conference table, flanked by Marcus and Caroline, as they prepared for their most important board meeting yet. The walls displayed framed articles from business magazines featuring their transformation story, alongside vintage photographs of their father and grandfather building the original company. Before we begin, Rebecca said, looking at the assembled board members and senior staff, I want to read something. She opened a leather-bound journal, her father's private diary, which Pemberton had given her 6 months after the will reading. This is from Dad's final entry, written just 3 days before he died, she said, her voice steady but emotional. I've been a stubborn fool about my daughter, Rebecca. She saw the future of our industry while I was clinging to the past. I hope someday she'll forgive an old man's pride and come home to lead what I built into what it can become. The room was silent as Rebecca closed the journal. Caroline reached over and squeezed her hand, while Marcus nodded encouragingly. Today marks the first anniversary of our modernization program, Rebecca continued, transitioning into business mode. Our revenue has increased 340% from last year. We've created 200 new jobs in the greater Boston area. And we're about to announce our biggest expansion yet. Janet Morrison, their operations manager, activated the large screen at the front of the room. Charts and projections filled the display, showing growth trajectories that would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. The sustainable textile market is projected to reach $25 billion globally by 2025. Marcus reported. Our patents on antimicrobial fabrics and moisture-wicking technologies position us to capture a significant share of that market. Caroline, who had become their head of strategic partnerships, added, "We've signed exclusive contracts with 12 major medical centers, 8 athletic wear companies, and we're negotiating with 3 automotive manufacturers for interior fabric applications." The board members, a mix of industry veterans and young innovators, nodded approvingly at the presentations. Rebecca had insisted on bringing in fresh perspectives while maintaining the institutional knowledge of longtime employees. "But our success isn't just measured in profits," Rebecca continued. "The William Hartwell Innovation Scholarship has awarded $2 million to 37 young entrepreneurs in its first year. 3 of our scholarship recipients have started their own companies, creating additional jobs and innovation in Massachusetts." She clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of young inventors and business owners who'd received support from the scholarship program. "This is Dad's real legacy, not just the company he built, but the culture of innovation he ultimately embraced." After the formal meeting concluded, the 3 siblings remained in the conference room as the sun began to set over Boston Harbor. The city lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk, creating the kind of view their father had admired from this same building for decades. "I got a call from the Smithsonian yesterday," Caroline said with a grin. "They want to include our transformation story in an exhibit about American industrial innovation. Apparently, we're becoming a case study in business schools." Marcus laughed. Dad would have gotten a kick out of that. His little textile company becoming a Harvard Business School case study. Rebecca walked to the window, looking out at the harbor where ships had once brought raw materials to fuel Boston's industrial growth. Now, those same waters carried finished products bearing the Hartwell Industries label to markets around the world. "I've been thinking about something," she said, turning back to her siblings. "What if we established a foundation focused on helping other family businesses modernize? There must be thousands of companies facing the same challenges we did between tradition and innovation." "The Hartwell Foundation for Family Business Innovation," Marcus mused. "I like it. We could provide consulting, funding, and mentorship to help other families navigate change without destroying their legacies." Caroline pulled out her tablet and began making notes. "We could partner with universities, create internship programs, maybe even start a documentary series about successful family business transformations." Rebecca smiled at her siblings' immediate enthusiasm for expanding their impact beyond their own company. "Dad always said the measure of success wasn't how much money you made, but how many people you helped along the way." A knock at the conference room door interrupted their planning. Janet Morrison entered with a bottle of champagne and 3 glasses. "I thought you might want to toast something," she said with a knowing smile. "The final numbers are in from our first full year of operations. Net profit increased 425% over last year, and we're officially debt-free for the first time in over a decade." As Marcus popped the cork and Carolyn poured the champagne, Rebecca felt a profound sense of completion. She'd spent 12 years building success in isolation, proving she could thrive away from her family. But this sharing achievement with the people who mattered most felt like what success was truly meant to be. "To Dad," Rebecca said, raising her glass toward the vintage photograph of William Hartwell that hung above the conference table, "who taught us that caring for family isn't about words or proximity, it's about actions and sacrifice." "To Dad," Marcus and Caroline echoed, their glasses catching the last rays of sunset streaming through the harbor-facing windows. "And 2 second chances," Rebecca added softly. "For stubborn fathers and prideful daughters, and for families who find their way back to each other." As they drank their toast, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from her executive assistant. "The Wall Street Journal wants to feature you on next month's cover. The story angle is the executive who came home. How family values transformed an industry." She showed the message to her siblings, who beamed with pride. But more than the media attention or financial success, what filled Rebecca with the deepest satisfaction was the sight of her brother and sister, the family she'd thought she'd lost, forever working beside her to build something their father would have been proud of. Outside, Boston Harbor reflected the lights of a city that had always represented tradition and innovation in equal measure. Inside the conference room of Hartwell Industries, 3 siblings had learned that the best legacy isn't preserving the past unchanged, but transforming it into a future worth inheriting. The grandfather clock in the corner, the same one that had ticked away the tense minutes during that first will reading, chimed 8 o'clock. Its sound now marking not endings, but new beginnings. Rebecca looked at her siblings and realized that sometimes the greatest success comes not from proving you don't need family, but from discovering that family needs you and that needing each other isn't a weakness, but the foundation of everything truly valuable in life. So, Marcus said, breaking the comfortable silence, what impossible goal should we tackle next? Rebecca laughed, feeling more at home in this conference room than she'd ever felt in her Seattle penthouse. How about we save a few more family businesses and change an entire industry? Sounds like a typical Tuesday for the Hartwell siblings, Caroline added with a grin. As they began planning their next ambitious project, the lights of Boston Harbor continued to twinkle beyond the windows, reflecting not just the city's heritage, but its endless capacity for reinvention and growth, much like the family that had learned to honor their past by fearlessly embracing their future.